Hello, class. Welcome back to our next part of lesson 3, dealing with radical expressions. Back in lesson 2, we talked about how we can get rid of square roots on the bottom of a fraction by rationalizing the denominator. It was as simple as multiplying that bottom by the same expression. If you flip back to example, I think it would have been like example 3 from lesson 2. The very first one was like 1 over the square root of 2. Well, we rationalize that by doing the square root of 2, multiplying the bottom, and then the top by that term to get rid of the square root on the bottom. Today, we are going to talk about how we rationalize the denominator when there is a binomial, so two terms, in the bottom of a denominator. The first step that we need to take in doing that is learning something new. It is called the conjugate. The conjugate is I'll say conjugate pair. A conjugate pair is when two terms that are the same are added and subtracted from one another. So they always will come in pairs. It is the sum and difference of the same two terms. Okay, so just a simple example. Would be the square root of 5 and the square root of 5 plus the square root of 2. Its conjugate pair would be the square root of 5 minus the square root of 2. Okay. So, as we take a look at this, let's imagine we FOILed these two expressions. Okay. We'll be doing this in our one example for today, but I think it'll be helpful to see this on its own before we implement it into a example. If we were to FOIL the square root of the square root of 5 plus the square root of 2 and the square root of 5 minus the square root of 2, we should notice that one thing that we should notice is that this is actually similar to one of the factoring patterns back in chapter 8. We'll FOIL this out. So the square root of 5 times the square root of 5, since we're multiplying the square roots by the same thing, it just ends up being what's inside. So it's going to be 5. Now, outside, the square root of 5 times the negative square root of 2 would be minus square root of 5. Square root of 2, we don't need to put them together to make the square root of 10. And then let's say the inside, square root of 2 times the square root of 5 is, well, positive square root of 5, square root of 2. Okay. And then lastly, when we do the last term, the square root of 2 times the negative square root of 2 would be minus 2. We should notice, because the signs are opposite, we have a plus and a minus, that those outside and inside terms cancel out. These will cancel out their opposites. So all we have to do is think to ourselves, what's 5 minus 2? It's 3. So even if I went through my calculator and like typed this out, I don't expect you to do it. Just watch. Square root of, so I'm going to need some parentheses. Square root of 5 plus the square root of 2 times the square root of 5 minus the square root of 2. We should get 3. So we are going to use this when we rationalize denominators of fractions with a binomial. So this will be example 3. And I'm just going to do this. I'm going to say simplify the quotient. One thing that you should notice a little bit when we work through these expressions is that we normally work through these like thinking about like, oh, the adding and the subtracting and then the multiplying and then the dividing. So it's ample. It's easy to understand this. Like we did adding and subtracting and multiplying yesterday. Now we're doing dividing. So let's look at the expression -3 divided by, let's do the square root of 6 plus 3. Okay. -3 divided by the square root of 6 plus 3. Okay. So the first step we take when we simplify this is we find the conjugate. And I'll write, what's the best way to do this? Yeah, I'll do it like this. Let's find the conjugate. Now, remember, we said that the conjugate pairs are the sum and difference of the same two terms. The same two terms. So, we have the square root of 6 plus 3. What is the conjugate to that? Give you another 5 seconds to think about that. The conjugate is, and I'll write it beneath it, is the square root of 6 minus 3. Okay? So what we will end up doing is we use this to, step 2, rationalize. Okay? I'll do that right there. To rationalize. So we will take that expression, the square root of 6 minus 3. When we multiply it by the bottom, we also have to multiply it by the top. The square root of 6 minus 3. We rationalize. So, as we do this, and we can kind of do this work a little bit off to the side to save some space up here, we are going to be foiling because we will have to FOIL this expression. So that's what we practiced at the end of the day yesterday, as well as right up here. So the square root of 6 minus plus 3 times the square root of 6 minus 3. Let's go ahead and FOIL. Square root of 6 times the square root of 6 is 6. And I can go ahead and do the middle, the outside and inside terms. So minus 3 square root of 6 plus 3 square root of 6. And we should know that those will cancel out. And then 3 times 3 is 9. So we have a minus 9 on the outside. Okay. So we can come back to here and we can start thinking about simplifying this. This is 0. 6 minus 9, -3. So up here, we will have a negative 3. All right. Okay. Now, all we have to do is carry this negative 3 to each of these terms. Okay. So negative 3 times the square root of 6 will be negative 3 square root of 6. And then negative 3 times negative 3 is positive 9. Now, you can leave your answer like this. Okay. There might be some of you who do not like that negative on the bottom. So what we can do is we can factor it out. If we were to factor it out and factor a negative from the top, heck, look at this. How ironic, actually. Negative 3 divided by negative 3 is 1. 9 divided by negative 3 is negative 3. So this won't always happen, but this is the same thing as negative 3 from here plus the square root of 6. Okay? You do not have to simplify it in that way. You can leave it like this. Okay? If this was maybe a problem in the book, it may simplify it, but nonetheless, these are the same. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and give you just 6 more problems to practice this very thing. Some of them will be evens. I think I said yesterday I'd only give you odd problems, but I'm going to give you just a couple evens just so that you can have enough practice with this. Your homework that's due tomorrow is 30 through 35. These are still on page 629. Okay, it's like the next section of problems. So let me know if you have any questions. Even if you have questions from problems yesterday. Hope you have a good rest of your day, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.